Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be like doing a deep dive into something that's become so popular, especially online when you're shopping.
Oh, yeah.
You've probably seen it.
For sure.
Buy now, pay later, BNPL.
Yes.
Those little buttons, that say you can get this right now and pay for it later. We've all seen them. Maybe some of us have even used them.
Mhm.
But we're going to really dig deep today, go beyond the surface and really get into some of the risks that BNPL can pose, especially because it's becoming so common now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a really timely topic, and although BNPL can seem really convenient, a way to manage your money, the truth is that it can lead to some, pretty big financial problems that a lot of people just don't know about.
And that's what we're here to unpack today.
Yeah.
We're going to be pulling from this Charles Schwab article, which does a really good job of breaking down some of these risks
Yeah.
in a way that anyone can understand.
Right.
So let's get started.
Okay.
Let's talk about that instant gratification thing.
Yeah.
BNPL lets you have the item right now and pay for it later.
Yep.
It just plays right into that desire we all have.
Totally. Like, who doesn't want things right away? They
Right.
really all do. But the problem with this BNPL is that you kind of miss out on this really important skill that you need, when it comes to money, which is delayed gratification.
Oh, yeah.
Think about the old layaway system.
Oh,
Right?
yeah, our grandparents.
Yeah, your grandparents had to save up like the whole amount, the whole price of something before they could even take it home.
Right.
So that, really made them be disciplined
Hmm.
and, they had to be responsible with their money. But BNTL, it kind of does the opposite.
Yeah, it flips it on its head.
Yeah.
It makes it way easier to just impulsively buy stuff.
Yeah. And spend more than you planned.
And I think it's interesting because, you think spreading out those payments would make people more aware of their spending.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like it's almost doing the opposite. The article actually mentioned that something like 39% of adults in the U.S. and over half of Gen Z have used BNPL, at least once.
Wow.
Those numbers are huge.
Yeah, they are.
That shows you just how embedded BNPL is in our shopping culture these days.
Yeah, and what's kind of scary is that a lot of people might be using these services without even fully getting what it all means.
Right.
For example, one of the big things people get wrong is how BNPL affects your credit score.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that if they use BNPL and they're responsible and make their payments on time, that it'll boost their credit, just like using a credit card would.
Right.
But that's usually not true.
Wait, really? I thought paying on time was always a good thing for your credit score.
Well, yeah, it is. But here's the thing. Most of these BNPL companies, they don't actually tell the credit bureaus about your payment history.
Oh, interesting.
So you're making all these payments, but they're not really being tracked or factored into your credit score. It's like you're invisible to the credit world.
So it doesn't help you build credit,
Hmm.
but if you miss a payment, does it hurt your score?
That's where it gets, kind of tricky. While, making your payments on time with BNPL, it doesn't really get noticed. But if you miss a payment or you're late, that can get reported.
Uh-oh.
And that can definitely hurt your credit score.
So it's almost like you don't get the good stuff, but you can still get the bad stuff.
Yeah,
They're not really looking out for you.
exactly.
They're just waiting for you to mess up.
Right. They're not really invested in helping you, build good credit.
Right.
They're just trying to protect themselves.
Right.
And, that kind of leads us to another risk, late fees.
Yeah, the article talked about that and how late fees can be a real problem with BNPL.
Yes.
What's the big deal about these fees?
Well, first of all, they can be pretty high.
Okay.
And a lot of these BNPL companies, unlike some credit card companies, they don't give you a grace period.
Oh.
And, the worst part is that these fees, they can just add up so quickly.
Yeah.
You miss one payment, then you get hit with a late fee, and all of a sudden you owe even more money.
Right. And then you're even more likely to miss the next payment.
Exactly.
And then it just snowballs.
It's a vicious cycle.
The article actually gave an example of someone getting charged interest on a late fee, which is just crazy.
It is crazy, and that's a big difference between, using BNPL and a traditional credit card.
Right.
BNPL, it's not as regulated,
Right.
so you don't get the same protections.
Right. You don't have those same safeguards in place, to deal with late fees or to help you, you need to dispute something.
Exactly.
Yeah. The article mentioned that if you have a problem with something you bought using BNPL, it might be harder to get a refund or to get the problem fixed.
Yeah, you're right. And Don't forget about the perks that you get with credit cards,
Oh, yeah.
like rewards points and cash back.
Yeah, those are great.
With BNPL, you usually don't get any of that.
Right, so it's almost like all risk, no reward.
Yeah, it's all about convenience up front, but there's a lot of stuff hidden that people need to watch out for.
Right.
And, one of the biggest misconceptions is about interest rates.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking about. A lot of people think BNPL is always interest-free, but that can be a really bad assumption.
Yeah.
Right? We see those big
That's
0% interest signs everywhere, and it's easy to think that applies to everything you buy with BNPL.
Yeah, it's like a really good marketing trick. And it's true sometimes, for smaller purchases, especially if you pay them off quickly.
Yeah.
But when you start looking at the bigger stuff, like if you're buying something expensive or if you're spreading out the payments over a long time, that's when they usually start charging you interest.
Yeah.
And sometimes those rates are actually even worse than what you'd get with a credit card.
So it's kind of like they're tempting you with the idea of free money, and then bam, they hit you with all these hidden charges.
Yeah, it's like a classic bait and switch. And especially when you're shopping online, you get all excited about buying something and you just want to click buy. So you don't even bother reading the fine print.
You just want it now.
We've all done it. But with BNPL, being impulsive like that can really come back to bite you later.
And, we've been talking about all the financial risks, but I'm also curious about the psychology of BNPL. Like, what is it that makes it so tempting, even for things we don't even need?
Well, it really comes down to how our brains work. We're wired to go for things that feel good and to avoid things that feel bad. And BNPL, it lets us have that good feeling of buying something new without having to deal with the bad feeling of paying for it right away.
Ah, I see.
It basically pushes that pain off, so it makes it feel like the purchase isn't as big a deal in the moment.
So we're basically tricking ourselves into thinking we're getting a good deal, even though we might actually be paying more in the end?
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're putting on those rose-colored glasses and we can't see all the bad stuff that might come later.
And I feel like a big part of the problem is that a lot of people, especially younger people, they just don't really know enough about how money works.
You're absolutely right. They've grown up with all these services that give them whatever they want instantly, so they might not really get, like, how interest works or how much they should be spending compared to how much they make.
Yeah, it's like we're throwing them in the deep end without teaching them to swim first.
Right.
So for our listeners who are maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed, like, okay, this is a lot, what can I actually do about it?
Well, it's actually not as complicated as it sounds. The first thing I'd say is to take a good look at your spending habits.
Okay, yeah.
Like, are you using BNPL for things you really need or just for things you want right now? Could you save up for those things instead?
Just step back and ask yourself, do I really need this now or can it wait?
Exactly. And if you do decide to use BNPL, make sure you read all those terms and conditions really carefully.
Right. Understand the fine print.
Yeah, you need to know when those payments are due, how much the fees are, if there's interest, and what it might do to your credit score.
Don't just click agree without knowing what you're getting yourself into.
And here's a good tip. Set up reminders for those payments. It's easy to forget when they're due, especially if you have a bunch of different BNPL plans. A simple reminder can save you a lot of trouble and money later on.
Yeah, that's a good tip. It's like a little safety net to keep you from falling into a debt trap.
And maybe the most important thing to remember is that BNPL isn't a free pass to spend more than you can afford. It's a tool. You can use it wisely or you can misuse it.
Right. Be in control.
You don't want to let BNPL control you.
Right.
It all comes back to what, our grandparents always told us. Budget your money, save some of it, and don't spend more than you have.
Right. The basics never go out of style. They're how you build a strong financial future. And speaking of the future, that brings up another thing to think about. Opportunity cost.
That's a great point. The Charles Schwab article actually mentioned this, and it's something a lot of people don't consider.
Yeah, so when we choose BNPL, what are we potentially giving up?
Basically, when you use BNPL, you're promising to use some of your future money to pay for something you're buying now. That means that money won't be available for other things you might want to do with it later.
Right.
Like saving for a down payment on a house, investing for retirement, or even just having some money set aside in case of an emergency.
So it's like trading your future financial security for the satisfaction of buying something right now.
Exactly. And that trade-off can end up costing you a lot in the long run. Think about how much money you could make if you invested that money instead of using it to pay off those BNPL purchases.
That's a good point. It's not just about the cost of the item itself. It's about how that purchase affects your finances in the long term.
You got to look at the whole picture.
So we're wrapping up the second part of our BNPL deep dive, and we'd love to hear from our listeners. What are your thoughts so far? Has this conversation changed how you think about BNPL?
Yeah, what's stuck with you? What are you thinking about now?
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into buy now, pay later. It's been really interesting talking about all this, and I think we've really uncovered some of the potential risks that come with these services.
Definitely. I mean, BNPL might look really attractive at first glance, but it's super important to understand, the downsides, the things that could go wrong.
Exactly. We need to be making informed choices,
So sure.
choices that are good for us financially.
Yeah, in the long run.
So I think it's also important to say that for some people, BNPL can be a helpful tool,
Right.
especially for those who maybe don't have access to traditional credit.
Yeah, or people who are trying to avoid those high-interest credit cards.
Right, exactly.
That's a good point. BNPL can be like a stepping stone for those folks, to help them build their credit history, or if they just prefer a different way to pay.
Yeah, exactly.
But even then, it's really important to be responsible,
Right.
and to really understand, the details of how it works.
It's all about that balance,
Yes.
right? Convenience, but also being responsible.
Exactly. You got it. BNPL, it's not good or bad in itself. It's a tool. And like any tool, you can use it the right way or the wrong way.
It depends on your own financial situation, right?
And your spending habits.
So as we wrap up our BNPL deep dive, what's one key takeaway, one thing our listeners should really remember when they're thinking about using buy now, pay later?
Okay, so before you click that Buy Now, Pay Later button, stop and ask yourself 3 questions.
Okay.
First, do I really need this?
Like,
Could I just wait and save up for it instead?
good question.
Second, can I actually afford these payments, without messing up my other financial goals? And third, are there other ways to do this? Could I save up or could I use a credit card responsibly?
I love those questions. It's so important to just take a moment.
Yeah, be mindful.
Be intentional.
Yeah.
Don't get caught up in the excitement of the moment,
Don't let that impulse take over.
Because real financial freedom comes from making smart choices that empower you.
You got it. You don't want to be trapped in debt.
Well said.
Oh.
I think that's a great place to wrap up our discussion about the risks of buy now, pay later. I hope everyone listening found this helpful.
Yeah, me too.
It's all about empowering ourselves with knowledge.
Absolutely.
The more we understand about these financial tools, the better decisions we can make for ourselves and our future.
Yeah, for the long term.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive,
It was great to be here.
and we'll see you next time.